So to start off with some introductions, my name's Beck Fenlon. I'm Head of Customer Success here at ARKU. My role's really around making sure our customers get the most value out of using the product. Rob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. I'm Rob Green, founder and CEO of RecTech. Been in the recruitment industry since 2006 and established RecTech as a business at the end of 2019. We provide fee-free recruitment comparison or recruitment technology comparison services, helping organisations to identify the right technology solution for their needs.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. And Jack, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my name is Jack Spurway. I work with Rob as his head of marketing. So I look after a lot of the front porch, if you will, of RecTech across social media marketing and brand. And I've been working with Rob for nearly 2 years now.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jack. And brilliant to have you both here so that we can talk about how to convince your C-suite to invest in a best-of-breed TA strategy. So I guess to kick off the questions, why do TA leaders need a best-in-breed strategy?
Well, I think the first thing we need to think about is what is a best-of-breed TA strategy for anybody that is kind of wondering. And best-in-breed or best-in-class, whatever you want to call it, a strategy is a simple plan of action to achieve a goal. And as we're focusing on TA today, we're referring specifically to the strategy that you use to acquire the best talent for your business. I suppose at the very highest level, that's going to include things like the people you involve, the processes you follow, the technology you use, the way that you present yourself as a business, and even the HR policies and practices that you adopt internally. I think when you start to detail out that strategy, you're going to need to consider every element of TA, from how you define your hiring needs to how you onboard new hires, and even beyond that, maybe into how you measure the effectiveness of that strategy. I hope that's helpful for everyone that's listening. I know I'm probably stating the obvious. Most people know what strategy is. Going back to the original question, why do TA leaders need a best-in-breed strategy? Well, I think in today's market, it's not just about having a TA process and following that. There's so much more that can be done to stay ahead of the competition. I think there's so many innovative ways that people can acquire talent these days, so many that it's pretty hard to keep up. I think we all need a best-in-breed strategy to ensure that our efforts essentially aren't in vain and that we have a proven and effective method of keeping everybody moving in the right direction. We all want to achieve the most successful outcome for our business, and I think we're under a lot of pressure now to do more with less. So I think it really emphasises the importance of having a best-in-breed TA strategy. Just sort of adding to that, I think the other thing to consider is that a best-in-breed TA strategy isn't necessarily the same for every organisation. If you think about it, every organisation is different in the sense that we're all operating in different markets, where things are evolving all the time. We will have different people in our business, we're following different business processes, they're all aimed at achieving different objectives. And again, depending on the markets that we're operating in as well, candidate expectations can vary immensely. So I think whatever strategy you're going to implement, you need to really carefully consider what you want the outcome of that strategy to be. And it's going to be unique for your business and your operation. You need to really think about what your strategy needs to deliver and essentially what a win looks like for your business. And the other thing I think you always need to consider when it comes to your strategy is candidate experience. I think a business can actually profit from making that candidate experience exceptional. Essentially, if candidates really want to join your business, then if they've had such a great experience through the talent acquisition process, then they may not be so demanding when it comes to salary expectations. So if people are prepared to earn less in order to work for a great company, then you're multiplying that cost saving every time you make a new hire. I know I said a lot, but hopefully that kind of summarises why people need a best-in-breed TA strategy.
Absolutely, lots to think about there. Jack, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, it was more actually just to augment what Rob was saying about candidate experience. I think that there's the way that, especially within the technology wing of recruitment, and how technology is augmenting some of the basic processes and have been for years. We're sort of at the cusp of, as anybody that's kind of had their finger on the pulse for the last few months, on the cusp of quite a seismic shift in the way that people communicate and the way that brands are evolving, the way that people are connecting. It doesn't even matter if it's within recruitment. This is across anything that's customer or business facing with AI. And I think if you look at how the industry at large, and I'll use communications as a kind of catch-all phrase, between people, talent, companies, customers, candidates, and the experience involved in all of that, that is moving very, very quickly into a very sort of hybrid sort of digital first space, and it's moving very quickly. So I think when you're looking at a best of breed strategy and what that incorporates, being ahead of that curve is why this granular look at what a win looks like for your company in whatever format that is, trying to be cognizant of the way your win looks like in context of everything else that's shifting. That has to be very quick to adapt. It's got to be very open-minded. The way that those strategies change over time have to be quicker, faster, more sometimes more complex. And I think a best in breed strategy will have what a win looks like, and then contingencies within that win to make sure everybody's protected. So that's kind of my take on that.
Amazing, and completely agree. So now that we know what we want to aim for, I guess what would you say are some of the biggest barriers for TA professionals in getting to that best in breed strategy?
I think sometimes it is actually some of the internal stakeholders. You know, TA leaders are being blindsided by CIOs and CFOs making system consolidation decisions without consulting TA, and that often, you know, puts TA in a position where a solution is being implemented that doesn't meet their requirements, and as a result they end up having to contract with additional solution providers to provide the functionality that they need, or they need to potentially hire additional resources to make up for the lack of tech functionality or automation, and that nearly always ends up costing more as well.
Something to think for purpose, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I actually think as well you could extend that into the candidate space as well. I mean, a TA's job is when you cut all the fluff from it, a simple candidate first role. And I think if you're not involving to some degree that's, I think, fair in being able to influence decision makers, being able to show demonstrable evidence that these sort of uninvolved changes at C-suite level are negatively impacting at the very root of the job, then it's all gone pear-shaped. And I think so. Yeah, I tap on to exactly what Rob said there, which is if you don't consult your candidates at some point, be that just day-to-day feedback, be that something a bit more sort of system-based, then again you're one hand behind your back and it's going to go nowhere.
I think you're absolutely right. I think to follow a strategy, you've got to be able to see what's working and what's not. And I think when it comes to talent acquisition, it's rarely a quiet place in a growing business. The TA is always really busy. So I think establishing a best in breed strategy in itself can also be a time consuming task and also be a bit of a burden on our talent acquisition team. But it is time well spent. Essentially, if you don't have the right tools in place to be able to measure how effective things are, then it's going to be really difficult to follow that strategy.
Completely agree. So I guess you've got experience working with hundreds of businesses. How can they avoid the barriers we've just discussed?
Well, I think TA need to be proactively demonstrating the success of their strategy to the business in order to ensure that they essentially have a seat at the table when it comes to influencing key decisions. I think whilst the fundamentals of TA haven't changed, they've been the same for years, the market is moving incredibly quickly in so many areas, and that means that not only do you need to ensure that you're implementing the correct strategy from the outset, but you also need to be conducting regular reviews of that strategy. I think there are so many moving components in TA that in my experience, constantly reviewing what's working and what's not is key. So it's not just a case of implementing a strategy and then sticking it on the shelf. It needs to be under constant surveillance. I think people need to be making data-driven decisions, and I think technology also plays a key role in that. It isn't just about making sure that you've got the right tools in place, but also ensuring that you're using them effectively as well. And I think this comes back to what I said earlier about, what does winning look like for your business? There are tons of examples I could give you here, but if you're looking to, if you're looking to target cost savings, for example, then you need to be accurately measuring spend. I know that sounds really obvious. If you're looking to reduce time to hire, then you need to be measuring how long the process takes, not just from when somebody applies for a job to when you actually hire them, but every stage in the process in between, so that you can pinpoint any issues or bottlenecks that might exist in that process. And throughout that entire TA process, we've got the opportunity to collect an immense amount of data. So I think when it comes to continuous improvement, data is your best friend. If you're going to make data-driven decisions, you need to do that with great, really solid, consistent data that you've got absolute confidence in. So it's absolutely essential that you've got the right solution in place to capture that data and to provide it back to the business in a way that is easy to digest and meaningful.
And I guess work with your technology partners to provide that as well, right? Because we've got so many of our clients relying on us to help them collate and present that data across their business. Please don't think that you're on your own in creating that and collating it. And as you said, it is time exhaustive. So please do rely on us or your similar technology partners to gather that and help provide that for you. Sorry, Jack, what were you about to say?
No, I was going to say, I think sometimes it just comes down to how simply you can pass that data or visualize it for people further up the chain. And I think, again, it's not trying to be too cynical about how people's sort of digital knowledge is. I think there's a huge, not a gulf, because I don't want to assume that any one company or demographic or age would ever not understand very sort of deep granular data research. But when it comes to the analysis and the visualization and then the communication of that data to decision makers, often it cannot be convoluted. It has to connect strategically to business goals. It has to connect to exactly what TAs are doing, but it also has to be very clearly communicated, and it has to be resourceful. It has to be demonstrative. It can't be too highfalutin. It can't be full of I would say too sort of technical. It's actually, well, that's actually kind of where I was going, is that you can be as in-depth or as granular as you'd like. And that's where I guess technology providers are really trying to provide their ROI there, is that they can be as specific or as generalist as needed based on what the C-suite need today. And that may change tomorrow, that may change next week, but it's how you use that data, visualize that data, then present that data as a TA. That we can help. I mean, that's what RecTech do, that's what so many providers do, is actually give that exact data in a way that is, completely right for the, for a presentation today to a C-suite member of, and then impacting change. So I think that's really important. I'm agreeing with what you're saying, basically.
And you're so right about the need for it to be iterative as well, when the needs changing, and just because you've got your board pack set up for this month, and how does that evolve? How does that change in future? Because as you say, business objectives change, and therefore we need to be adapting with it. I guess in terms of specific calls to action, which I think is what hopefully everyone's wanting coming out of the webinar, I guess, do you have any specific tips that you want to share on avoiding these pitfalls?
Well, I think there are a number of questions that TA leaders should be asking themselves, and that is, do you report up to C-suite or board level each month? And is there a focus on continuous improvement for efficiency? Are you able to demonstrate that ROI? Are you the ROI of the initiatives that you put into place? I think to do all of those things, it's really important that you have the right tools. And I'm sort of at risk of sounding a bit biased, as an organization that help our clients around the world to find the right tech for their needs. I guess most of the time I'm wearing a tech hat when it comes to things like data, making sure that you've got the right tools and things in place. But it is so important. I think technology is such a pivotal part of a talent acquisition operation. It sits really at the heart with your people. It sits right at the heart of the operation. And I believe, the technology that you use can be the success or failure of a talent acquisition strategy, and not just being implemented, but actually being successful and being able to use that to kind of to report up to C-suite and make sure they've got the information to make wider business decisions. And it's not important just to provide that information to the C-suite, but it's really understanding what they're going to do with that information. What are the wider business objectives? How can you if you can sort of get slightly more under the skin, maybe build some of those relationships with the senior stakeholders in the business, and really understand what is it that they need in order to determine whether or not their talent acquisition function is being successful. That's going to help you to really determine the kind of data that you need to be providing, how you need to be providing it, even down to an individual level, whoever's actually processing that data, what's the easiest way that you can share it with them that's going to be, it's simplest for them to understand and to do something with. And I think you're also building, your own credibility. If you're a TA leader out there, or a HR leader out there, and talent acquisition is part of your remit, you're really building your own credibility internally. It's what I said earlier about making sure that you've got a seat at the table when it comes to making key decisions. Getting your voice heard in the business is often about having those relationships in place, and I think to keep those relationships in place, you've got to be able to demonstrate that your team's delivering. In order to do that, you've got to understand what the business is looking at.
It's such a great point you make around your CEOs, your CFOs. They're not TA professionals. They don't necessarily know what they should be aiming for, or what a best of breed strategy is. And really, it's up to the TA professionals to educate them proactively and show that. I guess we've talked about how we can proactively get that, but what about the reactive side? You talked about people being blindsided by decisions that are made without their input. What should people do if this is too late and it's already happened to them?
Well, I think for CIOs, it's probably understanding whether their aim is system consolidation for efficiency or cost saving. And the CFOs, it's probably budgetary, but it's always worth confirming that. And if the aim is system consolidation, will losing functionality mean that you have to integrate with another solution? I know I mentioned this earlier, but do you need to bring in additional solutions in order to supplement your ERP or HRIS? And is that going to mean another integration for the CIO? They have to maintain that? And does that defeat the purpose, as you said earlier, about system consolidation? And for me, it is all about kind of working together and making sure that you've got that understanding of what they're trying to achieve, so that you can give the information they need to support it. If the aim is budgetary, then I think sometimes losing functionality means that you need to hire more resources in order to make up for that shortfall, and assigning more budget to resourcing in order to get the same number of quality applicants is obviously going to be again a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah, completely agree. So I guess, how should TA leaders go about building their business cases to support their best of breed strategy?
I'll jump in on this one if you like. I would say we'll go back to what Rob just said, which is about how you can avoid unnecessary consolidation, or how you can present data in a way that can impact meaningful change, as in where you can avoid potential pitfalls, where you can preempt issues with, be they consolidatory issues, be they budgetary issues. You can actually look ahead. I would say, and almost going back to actually a point you raised a moment ago, which is lean on third party, like ask. I mean, this is exactly why we're here. It's why RecTech why we have sort of dominated this niche of sort of technical recruitment tech authority, if you will, is that there's a clear connection between needs across the recruitment company's kind of horizon, from TA to CIO or CFO, that we can provide. As an example, we can provide a data that is accessible, it's verified, it's deeply detailed about what technical solution is going to be right for your needs, as in for your business strategic top line needs. And we provide that data for free, like through our comparison tool, through RecTech Compare. So that's an easy win for anybody, is, and not just us, find other providers just like us who can give you that detail in a granular but well presented manner that can actually provide that information for you as a TA. And then obviously you can then push that up the chain, and it becomes just very easy to understand across every level. And that actually counts for candidates too, is that at the front door of your company, candidates are being heard, they're being seen, they're being pushed through the system and the funnel in more effective ways. They are, simply just providing a more effective service. And I think that's a great way to support a best of breed strategy, but actually provide real kind of verifiable information of, this is how this strategy can be better. Here it is. This is how we can provide a whole range of better best in breed strategies. So I'd say start with companies like us.
Yeah, and just jumping on the back of that, I think it's important to understand as well, if you're putting together a business case, like if you're going through a transformation and that involves technology and you're putting together a business case, then really think about what it is that's going to influence that business case in order to demonstrate to the business that this is the right thing for them to do. And they're definitely going to want to see that you've done your homework. And again, just kind of jumping on what Jack said really about our tool is really unique. You know, it allows you to very quickly and easily get a very wide perspective of the market and identify which solutions right for your business based on very specific business needs. But in addition to that, you know, if you're putting together a business case, in order to demonstrate that homework, we built an evaluation tool. So the evaluation tool basically lets you evaluate vendors in the market really, really quickly and download that evaluation and add it to the business case. When you put something like that in, it's incredibly powerful because it really, I mean, you're talking about the average number of requirements in our platform is something like 87, but we see that as high as 150. And when you can include that level of detail in a business plan, you know, it's much more likely that the business plan is going to get taken seriously and that your voice is going to get heard. Yeah, I think it just demonstrates a lot more confidence. But, sorry, I was jumping on the back of what you were saying, Jack, because you were talking about using tools like ours. But yeah, if anybody does want a bit more information about that, let us know. I'd be really happy to help. And we obviously don't charge for our service. It's completely fee-free.
Amazing. And I guess just to add to that as well, one strategy that I've seen work really well is to utilize allies across the business to help support that business case before you're presenting it. And getting people on side. I guess who should TA leaders be looking at towards their allies?
Look, I couldn't agree more. I think in order to get a business case kind of not just in front of the right people in the business, but I think if you've got people kind of supporting your business case before it even gets shared, you know, leveraging those internal relationships are actually absolutely essential to allow that to happen. I've worked with people in the past that you know, see their C-suite as a bit of an obstacle. It's not uncommon for people to say that, but I in my experience, I think a C-suite's only ever really an obstacle if they don't get what they need or they're not getting what they need. And that really goes back to what we were saying earlier about understanding what they need so that you can give them the right information in a way that is digestible and useful and supportive of the wider business objectives. I think it's really important to understand that you know, you might wear different hats and different priorities, but if you view other stakeholders in the business as allies and not as obstacles, and you can demonstrate your successes while building really strong relationships, then you're far more likely to get the buy-in that you need, you know, when you need it. I think recognizing that you're all on the same team and working to understand that the wider business objectives, you know, what they are, what those wider business objectives are when it comes to talent acquisition. And really sort of leveraging that, I suppose, to increase your output and build rapport and really develop those key relationships will put you in a much better position to kind of demonstrate that credibility and get your voice heard when it counts.
Yeah, I think credibility is vital. Actually, I'll pick on that as if a C-suite consolidation strategy is actually knackering your employer brand, if you're actually finding that competitors are, if you just suddenly your entire social media outreach is just suddenly dead in the water, you're finding that that sort of entire arm of the TA business, as an example, is suddenly just really dropping off a cliff face, then that has to be demonstrated as well. That those negative impacts have to be well presented, have to be data driven. They equally have as much sway as positive and successful strategic kind of technical implementation in whatever format that is. So that has to also go, and that is obviously much more of a question around how are we credible within the market now? Are we actually finding we're not just dropping off some basic KPI numbers, but are we actually, is our brand suffering for it? And I think that's also, it's a bit of an intangible, but that comes in slowly and that seeps in without, a lot of the C-suite won't notice that. And I think the further that goes up the chain, the less important, and I use that with money is, less important that is. And I think for TAs, it's vital they keep pushing that up and reminding the power of brand and how, you know, a failure there or consolidation, brands shouldn't ever need to consolidate when it comes to how you connect emotionally with candidates and how you inspire them to trust you, to look after their career. And that is so important that doesn't drop. And I think that's just one of those other things that gets tucked away.
I always say you never get a second chance to make a first impression.
Absolutely.
Like when candidates engage with your career site, sometimes that is your opportunity to make that first impression. And if it starts well and the experience is great, It's really important. So I think on that, I think it's really important for TA leaders to be constantly on the case when it comes to defining what their strategy is and adapting to that. Adapting to any changes within the business, for example. I know we mentioned it earlier, but measuring success is just such a key item when it comes to your weekly agenda. It should be something that you're doing all the time, literally taking a magnifying glass to the entire process and refining it at every opportunity, not just in terms of speed and efficiency, but in terms of candidate engagement.
Yeah.
I think you sorry, Beck, were you going to say something?
No, I was just making agreement noises.
You were asking for quick wins, though, I think, and we started kind of articulating some more high level stuff. But I think in terms of quick wins, I would definitely advise taking the time to understand what a winning TA strategy looks like for your business. And I know I said it at the top of the call, but it's different for every organization. So really take the time to kind of identify, like literally map out your processes from end to end. Identify, who's involved in the process. Map out every single step of that process, and that will give you an opportunity to identify where any bottlenecks might be occurring, where the pain points are, where the frustrations are. That kind of stuff's going to really help you to shape that strategy, and then it's a case of constantly measuring it. I don't want to keep coming back to tech, but I think there's a huge dependency on tech in order to measure what's working and what's not, because it's all data driven, and there's only so much that you can store between the team. It centralizes everything. I think if you're going on that journey of change, another thing that I'd say is a bit of a quick win is that you are not going to succeed alone. I think it's really important to make sure that you're engaging all of your peers and getting them involved in the entire process, really getting them energized about change or any change that you're planning to implement. I think that's really going to help you to get the buy-in that you need as well from your C-suite. If your whole team are kind of engaged in changing something for the better, and they recognize that it's going to add value, then it's much easier again to get them involved. So to get them engaged.
Agree.
Two, I guess, key pieces of advice that I would give if you are looking at changing your technology. I know I don't want to sound like we're constantly plugging our service, but there is a service out there that is completely fee-free that's going to support you with this. Use it. I promise you won't regret it. And ensure that you're really well versed with what those requirements are. And I know I mentioned a moment ago about mapping out your processes. That's also going to really help you to define what your requirements are. I think you're never going to know what you're looking for until you know exactly what it is you need. So I think having that kind of, that broad view of the entire process from end to end, and engaging the team and identifying where all of the frustrations and issues might exist currently, that's going to put you in the best possible place to understand your requirements. And that's the first thing you need to, it's probably the single most important thing you're going to do if you're going on a process of technology change, is actually understanding the requirements of the business. What is it you need that's going to drastically change your strategy for the better?
Completely agree. I am conscious we're at time, but I did promise the audience a couple of questions. So for those who are able to stay on, let's get to a few. Are there any standards I could draw on for how much we could be spending on a best of breed strategy?
I think there's so much to consider. It's
massive,
and it's completely different, I think, in my opinion, for every organization. You could be a startup with a small TA team that might be doing things really simply, and you might also have a very defined way of hiring candidates into the business, or you could be hiring at scale and being able to benefit from all of the efficiencies of buying in bulk. I mean, there are so many answers to the question, but I think it really depends on the organization or who's asking the question.
Yeah. I guess that's maybe something that individuals could reach out to you to maybe get more of a steer for their organization size and industry, right?
Definitely. We are seeing on a lot of data as well. So if anybody does want some help with this, please, feel free to reach out. We can provide very kind of industry specific data or regional data or whatever you need to kind of help get the best out of that question. But I don't feel like there's a one answer. I feel like I haven't answered the question, but I don't feel like there is one for everybody that's listening. I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
I think as well,
who asked the question can reach out to you individually and get a specific answer.
I think as well, when you look at, I'm only going to go back to what I mentioned a moment ago about AI tools and everything, and how simple those sorts of generative AI or AI agent-based solutions are going to come into play. Is that actually quite a lot of them, the financial barrier to entry is incredibly low and will stay low. And that's the terrifying sort of gut punch through to so many industries, from coding to content marketing, is that it can now be done for free at scale. So that kind of benefits anybody, from an enterprise to a startup. So again, it's looking, I think I revert back to what Rob was saying about strategically looking at what does a win look like to you? And I guess it's hard because every single sector TA operator will be different. But if finding a cost of what that win looks like based on how many people you're bringing in, your time to hire, your ratios of placement to interview to follow on to retain client, and how that comes through, and then being able to use that data to find a cost, if you will, is so subjective. But it can't be ignored that so many of those tools, referring back to tech again, are increasingly, well, especially in AI, are at the moment ridiculously cheap. So I think it's quite. That will change, and I think that's where the flexibility of your strategy, especially from a budgetary consideration point of view, has to be so important. You just have to stretch or not stretch, kind of as demanded sort of intends, really. Which I know is a little bit of a floaty answer, but it's hard to say. But I think that's really important to consider as well.
Looking at these questions, I think the budget theme has really struck a nerve here. My eyes are bigger than my budget. How do I balance my challenges against budgetary pressures and prioritize what is most important?
Wow. I mean, this is something that we're doing with organizations every day, really helping them to understand what they can get for the budget based on their specific needs, and not only what their needs are, but also how important are those needs to the business. And you've got to look at that at a really granular level. I always say, when people use our platform to compare tech, we're putting so much in front of them that I often worry that it creates a desire for something that you didn't know you wanted. But that's kind of what we're doing. And so we created this concept of a factor rating, which basically allows you to indicate, is this something that's absolutely critical to our business in order to have a successful TA strategy, or is this something that is more of a nice to have that we don't need right now, but we might need in 2 or 3 years' time. And also, we're considering budget. So all of the vendors that exist in our platform provide us so much data that we then verify, and that includes things like what they charge, and we also capture a budget from all of our organizations that help us to match them to the right solution providers. Every set of requirements in our platform and every shortlist that we generate is different because it's based on a completely different set of requirements. I mentioned earlier the average is like 87 requirements, which I still think is quite low and could be a lot higher. But yeah, it's trying to get the most for your buck. It's really about not necessarily being blindsided, but really understanding what is going to add value for the business. I think if you have something like 140 requirements, but actually 50% of those requirements are all kind of nice to haves, and you're selecting a vendor based on those nice to haves, it's going to end up costing more. Stick to the basics, stick to what's actually going to add value, what's going to make life easier, and often you find out of the 87 requirements we typically see, most of those probably 50% of those are important and higher. So I could go into more detail, but most of what you're looking for is probably more of a nice to have. And I think it's about really understanding, is it something that we want to be considering at this stage, or are we buying for the future?
It goes back to the data points that you were talking about earlier, right? What can you measure an ROI on, and what can you demonstrate the value that you're receiving from it?
Yeah. I would say as an aside to that as well, is kind of maybe reframe even the question, which is how do you balance cost challenges against budgetary pressures? You could almost reframe it as how could you balance cost challenges against user experience, and that if you just distill, budgetary pressures can be, every company will have a different budget. It could be, some could be depending on the kind of sector they work in. A temp agency's budgetary pressures are going to be wildly different to sort of like a niche IT to sort of perm or contract one. So I would say if the user experience is, if you put that on a par with budgetary pressure and say, well, how is the return on investment working when it comes to quantifiably improving the brand or negatively impacting the brand, then maybe that could be prioritized, that could be reprioritized, or at least found on a different, even keel, if you will. Those things, I think, sort of bring a different, almost like a different shade to the question of how far is my money going? That sort of reframes it as, can I afford not to invest in this particular tool or solution because the candidate experience or the user experience or even the TA experience is so tangibly improved by it, we can't not. So I think that has to come into it too.
I think that's a really powerful point for us to end on, because I'm conscious we are 7 minutes over. So a big thank you to everyone for sticking with us. Apologies for eating 7 extra minutes of your day. And a huge thank you to Rob and Jack for sharing all your thoughts with us. I found it immensely valuable. I hope everyone on the call did too. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.